Hi, everybody. Samantha Croston here with Anish Shroff. Welcome back into the Orange Zone podcast. Anish is somebody, for those of you who don't know, he's an SU graduate. He spent time early in his career working as a sports reporter at News Channel 9 here in Syracuse. And now he is the radio play-by-play voice for the Carolina Panthers and a commentator for various sports at ESPN, including college football, college basketball, and for purposes of our discussion today, college lacrosse. How you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's a busy week. We're at that time where May Madness starts to ratchet up a little bit.
Oh, definitely. And I know fans here are excited about it. I think to start, have to ask you about this Syracuse Harvard win. Where would you rank this kind of comeback compared to other college lacrosse games and comebacks that you've witnessed throughout the years?
Given the stakes and given just the way the tenor of the game was flowing, it ranks up there. I mean, I remember what was it, the 2013 national championship? Syracuse was up 5-0 on Duke, and then Brendan Fowler just started winning every faceoff, and then Duke ends up rolling to a victory. We've seen other types of crazy comebacks, but 11-6, fourth quarter, whatever it was, a 5-goal lead for Harvard in the fourth quarter. I got to be honest. I think it's two things. One, remarkable Syracuse comeback. Two, that's a choke job. There's no way around it. You're Harvard. You've got this team on the ropes, on the road. The way they didn't use their timeouts, there were things in that game where you just kind of scratch your head a little bit. It almost felt like, Harvard kind of shrank back when they should have continued to be the aggressor.
I completely agree. And honestly, I think that there are at least a handful of fans who really felt like going into that matchup, it could have gone either way, and perhaps even that Harvard was evenly matched, if not the better team. Do you just attribute that, a six-goal run to heart and hustle, or do you think part of that is more so Harvard and the mistakes that they made?
It's a combination of a lot of things, but the one guy in the center of it all is John Mullen. And when you have a game changer at the faceoff X, especially in the postseason where every possession matters, it usually means two things. One, you're never out of a game. And two, if you're winning, it's incredibly hard to come back on your team when you have that kind of faceoff guy. And so it almost felt like it was make it take it lacrosse. Syracuse would score, and obviously having that extra man opportunity was huge. And you could say, hey, it's a penalty you can't commit in that spot. But I think it's a combination of both, right? I thought Harvard got a little undisciplined in their clearing game, the penalty that they committed, and then John Mullen just being a guy who you felt was going to win every faceoff. He did it in the first meeting. Yeah, I think it's weird because I thought going into this game, I didn't think Syracuse would struggle as much clearing the ball against the ride as they did in the first meeting. They had seen it already. And then what sort of transpired almost seemed like a carbon copy for a little while. And both games were kind of the same, right? You walk away from both games going, Syracuse did not play close to its best lacrosse. First time they almost won. And then the second time they come back and they actually do win.
Well, right. And just looking at the stats and some of the things that came out, the thing that shocked me the most was the fact that the Orange were able to score five straight in a 1 minute and 39-second span to tie the game at 11. For those people who are just casual lacrosse fans, how unlikely is a run like that? Not just to get those faceoffs, but to continuously score those goals in that short of a period of time.
Obviously, having the man advantage on that non releasable penalty was huge, but you just don't see that kind of run in that small of a time frame. You just don't. So the fact that they were able to close the gap as quickly as they did, it was kind of like the scene in Anchorman where you go, oh, that escalated quickly. That escalated very quickly. And it changed the game. And I kind of thought from there, the crowd is energized. And once that crowd is energized, you're talking about probably as good, if not the best, home field advantage in the game.
As, a former SU student, would you truly say that when the dome is, as packed as it was in there, as energetic and as loud as it was in there, that it truly could have been at least one factor that played a role in that comeback?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. That place gets electric. We've heard other coaches over the years talk about when they go to the dome, you cannot let that dome be the 11th man. You cannot let them control the game. And for some coaches who've said over the years, when you walk into that place, guys just start looking up and they look in the rafters and, oh, there's 22 and there's all the championship banners. You're down a couple of goals before the opening faceoff. Harvard was able to mute that crowd for most of the game. Once they got going and unleashed all that pent up energy, you heard what Gary Gates said after the game. That made a difference. It felt like the good old days.
No, it did. Looking ahead, now Syracuse facing Princeton, at least in my mind, an offensive powerhouse. This is really one of the only teams that has gone toe-to-toe with Cornell, lost in the Ivy League championship, but still put up 15 goals. How would you describe this Princeton Tigers team to Syracuse fans?
If you're watching the offense, you can turn down the volume and play Mozart or Beethoven or Bach, and it still works because the way they move the ball on offense, and Syracuse does this too, but the way Princeton moves the ball on offense and how connected they are, it's a symphony. It's music, it's poetry. Mackesy with that left-handed release on the right wing, and he's become so much more than just a wing finisher who's a lefty. He's got one of the best shots in all of college lacrosse. There's a lyricism to that left hand. I have questions about Princeton in the cage in terms of goaltending, but this is a year where if you look at offense across the board, it's down. And the two teams that are scoring at a very high clip are Cornell and Princeton. I look at this game almost as a first to 15 kind of game. Goals are going to be scored. I think both teams will score on the other team. To me, a guy like John Mullen becomes critical. Can he tilt the possession advantage to Syracuse? And then what version of Jimmy McCool shows up? McCool's been unbelievable this year, with the exception of the 3 games against Ivy League teams. Struggled against Cornell and struggled in the 2 games against Harvard.
Yeah, that's true. Considering you said first to 15, I am somebody who is a big proponent of and loves to talk about cardiac cues and who doesn't love a good comeback moment. But you'd have to think that against a team like this that scores that many goals, that's probably the wrong strategy.
Listen, I do think that you can come back on Princeton when you have a face-off guy like John Mullen. I think the difference is Princeton's a better offensive team than Harvard. They're going to be able to score. They can lose the possession battle and still beat you. Again, sometimes when you don't see these teams head to head, you're trying to figure out strengths and relative weaknesses. So, for example, we talked about the Big Ten being really good on defense, and then Notre Dame puts up 15 on Ohio State, who's got probably a first team All American goalie. We talk about the Ivy League being incredible on offense. Well, no, Cornell was sluggish for about a half against Albany before they picked it up. We saw what happens when they can't pick it up. Princeton, I mean, they obliterated Towson. They put up 22 goals. It felt like they could have scored 30 at times. They made it look so easy. And again, Towson with Sean Nadalin, that's a defensive minded head coach. So there's a part of me that says, I want to say, oh, Syracuse has the pieces on defense and all that. Like, Princeton's really good on offense. That matters too. And they spin the ball and they pass guys open. The way these two teams play offense, it's very similar. It's fun to watch when it's clicking.
Who would you give the edge to in this matchup?
Listen, I don't want to give anybody bulletin board material because whoever wins the game, I got to call their game in the semifinals. So I'll plead the fifth on that one.
I think that's fair. But then I'll ask the question in a different way, just based on the things you just said. This is sort of an aside, but as a broadcaster, you obviously prep really in depth for these matchups, have seen these teams play the entire year. In May Madness, are there times where you just have to throw some of that prep out the window because what you're seeing on the field doesn't necessarily align with what you thought might happen?
I think that's every game, right? You have a plan going in. You look at the tape, you look at the numbers, the matchups, and sometimes it plays according to script, and sometimes it doesn't. Last week, the 2 games that I did, Richmond at North Carolina, UNC blitzes Richmond early. It's 4-0, it's 5-1. Richmond can't get out of its own way. And again, if you're looking at the matchup, you're thinking, wait, Carolina did the two things that you thought it had to do to control this game. They're playing up tempo, they're playing with chaos, and they have a first team All American in Brady Wambach at faceoffs. They're winning possessions. Well, second half that changed. Richmond controlled tempo, Richmond controlled the game. Richmond started holding its own at the faceoff X. Next thing you know, Spiders win by 3. They score the last 4 goals of the game. Duke Georgetown, I think going in on paper, having seen Duke a lot this year, you watch their defensive pieces, Aiden McGuire, Charlie Johnson, and you're thinking, all right, this was a Georgetown team that scored 3 against Denver a month ago, 3 goals. A Denver team that didn't make the postseason. And yeah, they got hot late. They won 4 in a row, but it was St. John's and Nova and Marquette, and the Big East is a one bid league. Duke's got a championship caliber defense, and Georgetown showed no, this is a hot team. They figured it out. They're winning matchups. Aiden Carroll is playing out of his mind right now. Fulton Bayman went nuts. And next thing you know, they put up 16 on Duke, which is more than Duke had allowed to anybody all season. So sometimes you do have to throw things out, and you have to give teams credit for improving, finding the right mix, and continuing to take those additional steps to get to peak performance.
That Richmond game was awesome, by the way, and I felt like is exactly what college lacrosse and the playoffs are all about. Okay, couple more for you. If Syracuse does win this game, it will be the first time that they're back in the Final Four since 2013. What do you think that that would mean to the program and perhaps more importantly to the diehard fans?
I think it just signals that the program is back where it's supposed to be. Um, Quint Kesnick is a great line. He says, nobody remembers a quarterfinal loser. Nobody remembers teams that lose in the quarterfinals. At Syracuse, the standard for so many years was nobody remembered a championship weekend team. Nobody remembered a national runner-up. They remembered teams that dogpiled on Memorial Day. That's the bar. But given how the world order and the state of college lacrosse has changed, where there's more talent, there's more parity, there are more teams competing. When I was in school, early 2000s, it was Syracuse, it was Virginia, it was Johns Hopkins, and it was Princeton. And then maybe somebody else snuck in there. But really, you had those four. And prior to 2003, a lot of times Syracuse got a bye into the quarterfinal. So now you only had to win one game to get to championship weekend. It's different now. We've seen a 2 seed lose in the first round 5 times since the tournament expanded. Syracuse has been on the losing end of a couple of those. So I do think there is probably a greater appreciation of what it means to get to championship weekend. There's going to be a feeling of this program's been restored. And I think the further you get from that run of 22 straight national semifinal appearances, now you realize, hey, it's been 12 years since they've gotten there. I think you appreciate even more the greatness and the longevity of what they were able to do in yesteryear.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. This is me jumping ahead a little bit, but I just have to ask you this because I came across this the other day and I found it interesting. The last time that Syracuse won the national championship was 2009 in Foxborough against Cornell, 10-9 overtime win. Just
One of
from
the
a,
greatest
go ahead.
championship games ever. Certainly in terms of the finish. I don't think we've had a better finish between regulation and overtime than that '09 championship game.
Considering that, and I know you're a Syracuse grad, I'm saying strictly from a storyline standpoint. National championship is back in Foxborough. Cornell, at least in my opinion, is probably the best team in the field. Is that a matchup, Cornell against Syracuse in the national championship this year, that you would root for?
Um, Again, I think you got to be careful because there's a chance that Cornell may have to go through Notre Dame in the semifinals. A Penn State team who, again, if Jack Frassion gets hot in goal, they're capable of beating anybody. Can Princeton go out and beat Syracuse? Yeah, they absolutely could. And then you got a Georgetown team that's been taking names and numbers. And Maryland, this time of the year under John Tillman, again, he's the best head coach. They have the most prepared team. They seem to play on Memorial Day all the time. They've been there 8 times already under John Tillman. So I think you have to be careful. I look at this field, and to be honest, I haven't even gotten that far ahead. I thought going in, I said, looking at the bracket, Notre Dame Cornell is probably a game that I think would have a ton of juice because Notre Dame's the two-time national champion going for a three-peat. Cornell is the team to beat this year. They're the number one seed. They proved it. If it's Cornell, Penn State's the only team to beat Cornell. So every game has its storylines. Nostalgia's fun, but it's a different game. It's a different game, right? As great as that Cornell team was in 2009 with Max Sebald, that Syracuse team was loaded. John Galloway, Joel White, Jovan Miller. There were so many stars on that team. This Cornell team is the team that has the first team All-Americans. They got CJ Kirst and Goldstein and Kelleher. So yeah, it's fun. It's a flashback element during the broadcast. Certainly, it stokes nostalgia. Certainly, I think from a Cornell standpoint, the storyline hits home because Cornell won 3 titles in the 70s. They haven't won one since. They've lost 5 times in the national championship game since their last title in 77. None closer than having the ball, and all you had to do was clear to beat Syracuse and win a national title. Instead, take away, and then we saw what happens at the end of regulation, and then Cody Jamieson wins it in overtime. So, yeah, I think from a storyline perspective, if it happened, it would be cool. But I also think Cornell Maryland would be a cool story. Cornell Princeton Ivy League rematch would be a good story. Notre Dame Maryland would be a good story. Throw Penn State in there. So, there's stories. There's stories in every game.
I respect that. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Last question. Will we hear you on the call on Long Island this week, or will that be somebody else?
Chris Cotter and Paul Carcaterra will have the call on Long Island. I may try to make a cameo. If my game ends early enough, I will probably try to shoot over to Hofstra. I have to shoot over to Hofstra to catch a ride to Annapolis on Sunday. So I'm probably going to try to make it there, and hopefully I can catch the second half or at least the end of Princeton Syracuse.
Okay. Well, thank you so much as always for your time. Really appreciate it.
You got it.